2018 Nicaraguan Protests Dialogue. National Dialogue. The national dialogue began on 16 May. Ortega kicked off the dialogue for Peace Wednesday saying, "We all suffer the death of our loved ones, but we have the obligation not to respond to violence with more violence, because otherwise we have scales that end in wars, and the people are tired of that." Students led with a strong demand. "We have decided to be at this table to demand them right now to order the immediate cessation of the attacks that are happening in the country," said student leader Lester Alamon, as protests continued throughout the country. After hearing the student, Ortega questioned the wave of protests, calling it irrational violence. Monsignor Mata made 3 requests to Ortega. On 23 May, the national dialogue was suspended. Archbishop Brenes suggested to create mixed commission of 3 representatives by each part to discuss an action plan to restore the table of the national dialogue. The Nicaraguan foreign minister, Dennis Moncada Colindres, objected that the agenda of the national dialogue involves 40 points that all lead to a single point, an agenda for a coup d'état for a change of government outside the constitution and violating the laws of the country. On the other hand, the university students, businessmen and civil society asked that a framework law be debated, which would allow to advance the elections, prohibit the presidential re-election and change the Supreme Electoral Council, CSE. Following the repression and over a dozen deaths in the 30th of May protests, the Nicaraguan archbishops cancelled the national dialogue and protests continued. IACHR resolution. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights adopted precautionary measures of protection for the entire leadership that make up the university coalition in Nicaragua and that have led to civic protests against the government since 18 April. The U.S. government urged Nicaragua to fully implement the recommendations of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, IACHR, to prevent further violence in the protests against the government of President Daniel Ortega.